Just in and brand new reporting, Chuck Schumer of New York, the leader, is now saying that Whitaker should recuse himself.
I'm going to guess that the reason Chuck Schumer said that is because of the statement that Mr. Whitaker made to CNN, which Catherine quoted and about which you and I have been talking in the past couple of minutes. If he is of the view that Bob Mueller's investigation ought not to exist, he cannot interfere with it. Even if he is the acting attorney general, he cannot interfere with it because the legal machinery has begun to roll, and it can't be stopped at this point without there being the appearance of some improper purpose for stopping it.
Judge Napolitano, thanks to Bret Baier, now host of Special Report and chief political anchor out of Washington. Brett, your thoughts?
Well, this is a big moment. You heard the president being asked about it. He kind of deferred, saying that there may be changes on the way. But no one's surprised that Sessions is one of the first. I think what they're surprised at is what you're talking about, that the acting attorney general is Matt Whitaker, the chief of staff, and that if true, he's overseeing the Mueller probe. I don't know that we have that definitively. I know it's out there and about in different forms, but that is the significant moment. And you already have Jerry Nadler on the Democratic side, who will take a chairmanship, saying that they need answers right now as to the choice of Matt Whitaker and what is happening with Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, and where is his role here? I think as this unfolds, Shep, we're going to get more information from the Justice Department, but the Whitaker appointment is really what's roiling Capitol Hill right now.
New reporting right now, Senator Schumer's statement is out. Chad Pergram has that on the Hill. Chad.
Right. Well, that's that issue about that recusal question and just how far is Chuck Schumer willing to push. You know, here's another issue. One of the reasons why Republicans lost control of the House of Representatives, certainly there were questions about votes on tax reform, health care, and also it just being a bad map for Republicans because of the retirements, but also because in certain quarters, these districts which were carried by Hillary Clinton, they didn't view their Republican member as pushing back sufficiently against President Trump and his administration and being a check here on Capitol Hill against his administration. It's these sort of perceived abuses is what roiled Republican voters, swing voters, women voters in these suburban districts, and one of the reasons that the House flipped. This is something that Democrats said, we're going to be a check, we're going to work on this, and here they're going to have this opportunity right out of the block. But that issue of the recusal is going to loom large. We just don't know enough right now in the early going. And don't forget, as I said a few minutes ago on the air, Shep, that a lot of these Republican senators and Democratic senators, for that matter, who served with Jeff Sessions felt that he got a raw deal. And they are going to work to protect Jeff Sessions. They're also going to work to protect Bob Mueller. Remember, there's some bipartisan pieces of legislation out there which the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has refused to call up. Tom Tillis has a bill from North Carolina. Cory Booker, Democratic senator from New Jersey, has a bill. Those pieces of legislation haven't come up, but one wonders if that conversation might start to get a little more ripe here, even in the lame duck session in the next couple of weeks, as an effort to protect Robert Mueller as they investigate deeper what happened with Jeff Sessions and how this may pertain to Rod Rosenstein and the Russia probe.
Chad, thanks. New reporting, the Schumer statement as follows. Given his previous comments advocating defunding and imposing limitations on the Mueller investigation, Mr. Whitaker should recuse himself from its oversight for the duration of his time as acting attorney general. More new reporting. I've just been informed that the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, is on his way to the White House. We are informed that he's on his way to the White House for a previously scheduled meeting. Bret Baier for context from Washington. Brett, the timing last night, he lost the House of Representatives, the investigative arm in the House. This morning, he holds what could be described as nothing less than, at least, an extraordinary news conference from the East Room of the White House, no less. Then moments later, these shoes begin to fall.
Yes, and we don't know exactly, Shep, how that all came out, how long, to the judge's point, that letter has kind of been ready to deploy. Did he feel like the news conference didn't get the focus or wasn't the focus that he wanted to have? And then this is a development that obviously takes a lot of oxygen in the room. I think the real question politically now is, as Democrats take control of the House, that obviously doesn't happen until January in their oversight capacity, do Republicans step up and say and protect the oversight of the Mueller investigation? Like, what is the extent to which Republicans, either on the Senate side or on the House side, come out with statements saying that either one, Whitaker, like Schumer says, should recuse himself, or two, there needs to be some protection that the administration is not going to just stop the Mueller probe?
Judge?
To follow up on Brett, look, the Mueller investigation is of the President of the United States. If the President of the United States intentionally puts someone in charge of the Justice Department who is adverse to the existence of the Mueller investigation and plans to do away with it or shrink it out of existence, dry it up by denying it the funds it needs to operate, it begins to look more and more apparent as though the timing and the mechanism here was intended to influence the investigation. If the purpose of the influence was to stop Mueller from knocking on whatever door he's knocking on, it could very well be obstruction of justice, which generates another investigation.
Are we expecting, Brett, something else to happen today, tomorrow, sometime this week, or very soon as it relates to the Mueller investigation?
You know, we don't know a timeline. When you talk to people in the know, and obviously we all know that the Mueller folks have been pretty tight on releasing information, but there has been activity and a lot of focus on Roger Stone. There have been interviews. We've heard of grand jury testimony, but it didn't sound like it was imminent. But for the Mueller probe, we really don't know until it happens. I do know on Capitol Hill, they expected after the midterm that some action was likely going to start to happen one way or another. And the question then becomes, if there is not another indictment, if there aren't more indictments, that process goes through the oversight at the DOJ. And as the acting attorney general, Whitaker could potentially sit on that and not even forward it over to Congress if he wanted to.
A little more context. It was the year 2016 that Whitaker wrote an opposing view editorial in USA Today newspaper, which was titled, and I quote, "I would indict Hillary Clinton, opposing view," and then it goes on to cite statutes and otherwise. Catherine Herridge now with some context on why other reasons Whitaker might be suitable for the president.
Right, well, this is certainly not a household name for most folks, Shep. My understanding from a contact who is familiar with Whitaker and close to the White House is that he's well liked by the president, but perhaps one of his strongest character traits is that he's seen by the president and others sort of as an outsider, someone who has not come up through the system, FBI or DOJ, with Robert Mueller, who was FBI director for 12 years, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, or Christopher Wray. He is not part of that generation, did not come up through the ranks with them, and is seen as somewhat more objective and an outsider. And a point we discussed earlier is that he has behind the scenes been very much a quiet advocate for the declassification of these Russia records. And the reason I keep saying that is that what we heard from the president today, number one, was about the first time he talked about these Russia records, and then number two, he indicated that he was going to move as quickly as possible to make them public.
Catherine, thanks. New reporting and context on Whitaker. Some more of his musings from the past. Trace Gallagher with that. Trace?
And kind of piggybacking on what Catherine Herridge was talking about and you and the judge were talking about, Shep, there were reports going back to September saying that White House Chief of Staff John Kelly called Matthew Whitaker, Jeff Sessions' Chief of Staff, saying that if Sessions left, Whitaker would step up as acting Attorney General. Remember, that's when Rod Rosenstein's tenure was in limbo because of the report that he wore a wire around President Trump. So keep that in mind. We know that Whitaker played football at University of Iowa. He was a treasurer. He ran for treasurer but lost. In 2014, he also ran unsuccessfully for the Republican nomination for an Iowa U.S. Senate seat. And as for the conversation you're having now with the judge, it's interesting that before he joined Jeff Sessions at the State Department, Whitaker was very critical of Democrats involved with Ukrainian sources during the election. In fact, he wrote an op-ed for The Hill demanding more scrutiny of a meeting between Democratic officials and Ukrainian officials. He also played down the now infamous Trump Tower meeting involving Donald Trump Jr. and a credible Kremlin lawyer who promised to have dirt on Hillary Clinton. And as for what you were just talking about, Shep, the op-ed was written in USA Today in 2016. It was an opposing op-ed to James Comey, then FBI director, saying that he would, in fact, or the recent FBI director saying that he would not indict Hillary Clinton. And Whitaker wrote the opposing, and it said, partly quoting here, a reasonable prosecutor may ask if on numerous occasions an unknown State Department employee had taken top secret information from a secured system, emailed that information on a Gmail account, and stored the information on a personal server for years. Would that individual be prosecuted? And he concluded saying, I believe they would. That's the op-ed, 2016 USA Today. Shep.
Trace Gallagher with the context. Thanks. New reporting now. Mark Warner, the United States Senator, Democrat of Virginia, the Vice Chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, quoting, no one is above the law, and any effort to interfere with the special counsel's investigation would be a gross abuse of power by the president. While the president may have the authority to replace the attorney general, this must not be the first step in an attempt to impede, obstruct, or end the Mueller investigation. Senators from both parties have repeatedly affirmed their support for the special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. Every one of them should speak out now and deliver a clear message to the president that the special counsel's investigation must continue without interference.